is Billy Seckham. I am a figurative painter. I live in Metuchen, New Jersey, and my artwork is, as a subject, is based primarily in painting the figure, but also it incorporates fashion. It incorporates symbols of empowerment, particularly. I think in my paintings, a lot of the girls that I end up painting in some ways are a self-expression of my own self-empowerment, and the female figure really is more just a vehicle to make a nice picture. But I also try to focus in my paintings building up textures in thick impasto paint, and having a lot of fun with the process of painting. I think it's important to focus on the academic quality of color and of course drawing, but as far as painting is concerned, it's really an exploratory process for me. I've been painting since high school, but I suppose I really started focusing on painting and really trying to get better in understanding what I'm doing in college. I went to Syracuse University for illustration. I thought I wanted to originally be an animator, drawing for Disney, but among that education we learned how to draw and paint, and so if not be an animator, certainly trying to paint maybe for a magazine, and that was the common approach back in those days. But since my wife and I have now lived in New Jersey for I guess 12 years, that's really where I feel like as a painter I've really blossomed, and it has a lot to do with the access to New York City with the galleries and the other artists that are in this area that you can go and see, whether it's in Chelsea or take classes with at the Art Students League. There's just a lot of wealth and knowledge around here, and that's where I feel like having painting for so long now, I think that just the resources that New York City has to offer can really take a person that is an entry-level artist and take them from here and really get pretty advanced. As painting influences go, I think as I've gotten older, that those influences have changed. When I was young, I was starting out again as an illustrator, and my influences were people like C.F. Payne and a lot of the classic illustrators that you see in magazines. But as I've continued to look at more figurative painters and painters in this area, I've certainly been influenced by people like Nelson Shanks, who painted Princess Diana, and he was based out of Philadelphia. And I had the opportunity to study with him in terms of thinking about color and how to approach the figure. But as I've taken that education and built upon that, the people as of late who I've been influenced by, and for the record, as most painters would say, I'm certainly influenced by the likes of John Singer Sargent, Anders Zorn, and even now that's more portrait based, but even people like Norman Rockwell again, who really painted academically. More recently, the people that I really come to admire are people like Tim Okamura, who's a Brooklyn-based painter, who does some really expressive work, primarily building up textures using graffiti as backgrounds and so forth. And his subjects are oftentimes strong African-American women, but he's influenced by his background and environment being in Brooklyn. I love his stuff, as well as of late I've really been influenced, or I should say at least inspired, by Basquiat, who, if you're not familiar with him, in the early 80s in New York City really made a mark in the painting world. And I think I've come to enjoy his work for the simple fact that there's something in these painters that is very freeing with their work. He is, you might describe his work more as like a Picasso, for example, he used bright colors and was very liberating in his brush strokes and the content that was in his paintings. So I think that as I get older, there's a want to get rid of kind of the maybe the handcuffs that academic painting puts on a person, and pay homage to that and be aware of the academic approaches, but then how do you spin that to make it your own? Such as in, I always talk about Jimi Hendrix, for example, on, he, as so many great guitar players, he studied guitar, but then in the end found his own voice in playing the instrument. And so I feel like for a lot of painters it's the same thing. I think the biggest piece of advice that I would give myself 20 years ago as a budding painter, I think would be to say not give up. And I think that for anybody that's had any level of minor or major success, I think I think that success largely comes as a result of not giving up. And I think it's those small successes that you can string together where you find a little bit of a groundswell and you find some movement in yourself. And I think in not giving up, that by itself is success. And there have been times when I've hung up my brush. For example, when my son was born, and I was questioning why I painted, and I couldn't answer that question, and so I hung up my brush temporarily, and I said, if I'm going to come back to this, I want to make sure that what I'm doing is honest, and if at the time I'm putting in, it's going to be worth it. It's going to be my own voice and not being so much concerned about what other people think. And so though I gave up temporarily, when I came back, I was much more myself, much more honest, and much more energetic about the painting process as a whole. Going forward as a painter, where I see myself headed, I think, is continuing to string together both teaching opportunities as a painter, whether it be within my own studio, which I just recently created. It's called Art Factory Studios, and I teach kids drawing and painting, but also within that I do a number of teaching engagements in the city, in New York City, at a gallery called Dacia Gallery, D-A-C-I-A, Dacia, and that's on the Lower East Side. And from time to time I teach a residency program there. That being said, I don't primarily see myself just teaching. I think the direction I'm headed, the paintings are getting really interesting, and I think it has a lot to do with, like I said earlier, about images that are exploring self-empowerment, as well as being fashion-driven and exploring paint applications and mark making. So I think the paintings will continue to get energetic and be fashion-based, and with every painting try to learn something new about the process, about myself, and I continue to see that evolving, and really just continuing to try to get into different shows, whether it's in New York or across the country or even overseas. But try to connect with galleries and like-minded artists and people who have a similar vision. And I found among those circles that a lot of the people in those circles have the same ideas, and really within that trying to support each other. So I'm going to just continue to push forward with the type of paintings that I like to do, in hopes that I also meet like-minded people along the way, and again, never give up.